Sometimes it's very complicated to have a traditional business line of credit, especially if you have no income. Now think about the fact that it becomes harder if you are looking for an emergency business line of credit with no income, right? So into this conversation, what I want to do, I want to show you the steps that you need to follow if you are trying to have an emergency business line of credit with no income. The first thing I want you to do here is that when we talk about emergency business line of credit, you need to understand that the lender, the bank or the credit union, they are asking for, they're thinking about, do you want to have a secured emergency business line of credit or unsecured business line of credit? Because the whole thing here is that if you want an emergency business line of credit, you need to understand that you have the opportunity to pledge collateral, and the collateral can be personal collateral or it can be business collateral. Okay, sometimes when you have this collateral, it can accelerate things. It can make things go a little faster. Okay, especially if you have no income, the lender is looking at you and thinking, oh, okay, what kind of skin do you have in the game? So you got to have skin in the game. And see, the whole thing is when we talk about a business line of credit, emergency business line of credit, you need to understand that the lender is looking at you and thinking, okay, I'm going to lose if this borrower never pays me back. So what kind of guarantees do you have, okay, that you are going to pay the lender back? So you have the opportunity, you have this option that you have, secured or unsecured. And sometimes it's just a lot better to have a secure business line of credit for emergencies, because if you have, let's say you have good assets, the good business asset that you want to pledge, this could be a possibility. Okay, let's say you have a piece of machinery, you have a commercial real estate that you think could really help you, then go ahead and do it. By the way, boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. I want to quickly explain to you how to get an emergency business line of credit with no income. So the first thing is decide between a secured and unsecured business line of credit. The second thing I want you to do here is to start looking for lenders in your geography. So you want to start with lenders in your city, in your county, in your state, and then nationally, who will actually find your business profile interesting. So when we talk about lenders, I mean, we are having a conversation about several types of lenders, right? You have banks, you have credit unions, you have alternative lenders, you have online lenders. The third thing I want you to do here is to start actually gathering the required documentation. So the lenders want you want an emergency business line of credit with no income. Okay, not a problem. See, the thing is, people believe that those types of funding, business funding, are very complicated. They're not. What is complicated is to gather the required paperwork, because if you're looking for an emergency business line of credit, you're not going to have time to gather the paperwork while you are in emergency, while your business is an emergency. Okay, you have to gather the paperwork like beforehand. So you got to have it on hand. You got to have your documentation on hand. So what are we talking about here? We are speaking about business licenses, your articles of incorporation. So if you have an LLC, you want to have articles of organization. If you have a corporation, you want to have articles of incorporation. If you have so a corporation can be a C Corp or S Corp, and it doesn't matter where your business is located at, because every state has give or take the same requirements in terms of formation, in terms of company formation. Okay, so the lender also wants to see personal and business bank statements. Remember, you are asking for an emergency business line of credit with no income, but the lender wants to see some kind of cash inflows, and you got to have a bank account so that the lender can see your business bank account and see the business bank statement. They want to see your profit and loss statement, actual and projected. So because simply you have no income doesn't mean that you don't have an income statement. Having no income means that you are not generating a profitable operation now, but you got to show something. You got to show like a loss or whatever, right? And a business plan and personal and business tax returns. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We're having a conversation about how to get an emergency business line of credit with no income real quick. Okay. The next thing I want you to do here is to really start thinking about based on your geography. Again, everything starts with your geography. Okay. Don't you try to be like in Georgia and trying to contact a lender in California. It works. If the lender is an online lender, it works, but it's just a lot better to first start in your state, start locally, and see what lenders are available before actually moving out of state. and nationally. Okay, and so you want to select a lender. So when we talk about selecting a lender, you want to start with your geography, and you want to contact banks in your area. You want to contact credit unions in your area. And then you want to apply for this emergency business line of credit. In other words, you have to apply for real. You have to submit the paperwork. You have to actually go to the bank branch or to the credit union branch and really submit the paperwork. Let me give you an overview here that will really help you understand this concept a little further. See, the whole thing is when we talk about emergency business line of credit with no income, you got to ask yourself: do you have a startup, or do you have an established business? Because the consequences are different. The impact is different. Okay, if you are an established business, you have to pay attention to cost and fees. If you are a startup, you need to pay attention to the requirements of that emergency business line of credit with no income. Let me explain. See, when you are a startup, the lender is looking at you and thinking, too complicated, too risky, right? So sometimes they will ask very strict paperwork, like documentation, proof of documentation, and like things like, they might ask you, 3 years of projected financial statements and very comprehensive business plan and so on and so forth. Now, if you have an established business, things are a little, the lender might still ask you stuff, but you want to pay attention to the cost and fees, like the draw fee, the payment processing fee, the wire transfer fee, the late fee, the prepayment penalty. Why? Because you already have a business. Okay. If they're going to grant you, let's say, a $100,000 emergency business line of credit, but then the lender is going to take like $15,000 in fees, that's a lot of cash. That's 15%. That's a lot of cash. And if you are in an emergency, you don't want to lose that much money to fees, okay, so-called fees. Okay, so this is really important to have a clear idea first before you get yourself into an arrangement. Okay, boss, I want to quickly remind you once again of the topic we're discussing today. I just want to explain to you how to get an emergency business line of credit with no income real fast. Okay. And one thing I want to say also is that when we talk about all the fees that I just mentioned, it's not just about the fees that you have to pay. You have to ask whether or not it is a one-time fee or recurring fees, right? Because you don't want to start paying like the lender, like on top of interest, other charges. Now let's review real quick the type of emergency business lines of credit, because the thing is, when we talk about emergency business lines of credit, it's not just your typical business line of credit, because you have various forms of a business funding that could qualify as emergency business lines of credit, okay, with no income, especially with no income, okay. Now, the first thing is the business term lines of credit. So the regular business line of credit, the one that I know, okay, the one that actually that you apply at a bank and the bank approves you, or the credit union approves you, and they actually allocate to your business, let's say $100,000 or $50,000, and you want to tap into that cash every now and then to pay for payroll, to actually take care of payroll, to take care of inventory, to buy inventory, to settle outstanding bills. That's the regular emergency business line of credit. You can also have invoice factoring. In other words, you have no income, that's true, but you have sales, okay? So you have sales, you can actually parlay those sales literally into income. In other words, you go and sell those accounts receivable to an invoice factoring agency or to an invoice financing agency. So that works a lot. I mean, especially if you have sales, but you got to have sales though, because when we talk about no income, we're not talking about no revenue, because you might have revenue, but no income. In other words, you have a loss. Okay. You also need to think about merchant cash advances. So those are kind of similar in the sense that you need to have sales. If you have sales, merchant cash advances are even better, because they're not cheap though, but they are better because you get your cash real fast. All you need to do, you need to show the lender, the MCA lender, then the cash advance lender, history of your credit card or debit card sales. The thing is, if you are a cash seller, if your business only processes payments and that processes revenue with cash transactions, you're not going to qualify for a merchant cash advance, because those lenders, they want to see proof electronically that you are actually great. Okay, you're doing good. And also, when we talk about emergency business line of credit with no income, the SBA might also actually step in. There is something called the SBA disaster line of credit that helps you also in terms of getting the cash you need until you start making it for real in this industry. Let me really sort of clarify for you the approach I want you to follow right now. And if you like, you need to really, because sometimes you might just need a regular business line of credit, not an emergency business line of credit, whether you have income or no income. So when to get an emergency business line of credit, the thing is you have to look at a few things. First of all, are you looking for cash to pay for essential expenses during a slowdown or change in operations? Like right now in this economy, we know what's happening right now, and a lot of things are happening. Some banks are closing. Some banks are being bought over. The FDIC is stepping in. Some parts of the economy are struggling. So if you happen to be in those, I would say, unfortunate parts of the economy, then you might need an emergency business line of credit with no income. Okay, and so if you are in those clusters, in those geographical clusters, then you'll need to have some type of cash on hand to pay for essential expenses during a slowdown or change in operations. You can also need the cash to replace broken or damaged equipment. Yeah, okay. And you can repair property damage in a disaster. Things happen. The disaster can be geographic or something else. You need to take advantage. You can use the cash to take advantage of an unexpected opportunity. Remember, if you're in business, there are always opportunities, some expected, some unexpected. So if you see a great opportunity, and this could be, for instance, a net 30 vendor who says, listen, if you pay me now, or if you pay me within 10 business days, I'm actually removing 20% of the value of the inventory for you. Think about it. That's just crazy. It's too good to be true. So if you have such a cheap inventory, you have the cash, you can actually use it for that purpose. Okay. And so when do you need to consider alternatives? Well, if let's say your need for capital is not immediate, especially if you can qualify for more competitive rates and terms by just waiting, okay, or taking on debt will actually harm your financial situation instead of helping it. So those are conditions that will actually discourage you from applying for an emergency business line of credit with no income. Here is a bonus for you. If you want to apply right away and get approved for an emergency business line of credit, no income, and bad credit, okay, that's the really important. So now we are basically introducing a new element into the equation. Before it was just no income. Now, if you want to make things a little harder by saying this person has no income but also has bad credit, then you have to really apply a very strategic solution. First, you want to evaluate your financing needs. Anytime you are in a dire situation credit-wise, you need to really be clear about how much you really need, okay? It's not about just saying, listen, I want to have $50,000. This number might sound like a round number that sounds like a really serious, but when the lender starts probing you, and they will probe you, about the use of loan proceeds or the use of line proceeds, this could be problematic. So you want to evaluate your financing needs, and what you do is you actually add like 10 or 20% to the number that you have found. That way, you actually allow yourself to have some kind of room for breathing, like you can breathe, okay? And the second thing I want you to do is to actually contact the lender and see if you can qualify for their emergency business line of credit, especially given your bad credit, given your bankruptcy, given your Chapter 11, given your your collections, given your charge-offs. Okay, so this is those are things you need to think about. Now, when we talk about checking your qualification, we also talk about things like sometimes some lenders will ask you to have a minimum credit score for an emergency business line of credit, no income. Some lenders will ask you for your statement of cash flows. Okay, some lenders will ask you to provide your personal credit score, your time in business, your annual revenue. Okay, so one thing you need to be clear about here is that you have to talk to the lender who actually is responsive with you. Okay, if they are responsive, if you're asking questions and they are responding right away, those are the kind of lenders you want to deal with. Okay, don't you go with a lender who is ghosting you. You actually contact them. Their team is so messed up, they don't get back to you on time, and you have no idea what your next move is, because you always have to have a clear idea what your next move is. So you have to really ask yourself, based on the lenders I have in my geography, in my state, for instance, okay, have I actually compared and contrasted all lenders who might be of interest to me? Because, for instance, you can be in Idaho and a lender in Connecticut likes your profile and they will be willing to connect with you. So anytime you get those unsolicited notices, you want to always respond. You want to always respond, even if the lender, even if the client, even if the lender is asking you stuff that you are not interested in doing, still answer. This will be very helpful down the road, because you are basically building your reputation, and your reputation is key in this industry. And one thing I also want you to do here is to evaluate. Like, you need to evaluate the kind of options you have. Okay, and once you evaluate the kind of options you have, then you have to submit your application. Now, getting an emergency business line of credit with no income means you already have a set of financial documents, so that when they actually ask you, you just give them right away, because that's the only way you're going to get your cash real fast. Okay, and it's really important to understand that those documents include business bank statements, business tax returns, business financial statements. Now, tax returns, in some cases, the IRS will waive that requirement, so you can just file regular business activities on your Schedule D. That's permissible if you have a sole proprietorship, with Schedule D. So one thing I also need to make sure you understand here is that the financial statements that we're speaking about, this have nothing to do with your emergency business line of credit with no income. Like, make sure that you prepare new financial statements that take into account the fact that you have been running a losing operation for many, many years. Okay, so that way the IRS knows, okay, you have been consistent even though you have been negative. So you have been consistent over and over and over. So they will give you credit for it. And one thing I also need to say here is that when we look for emergency business line of credit with no income, we always pay attention to we follow the money. You want to see what concentration of African states has the higher number of MTF, because that's how you are going to know that this is something very important for the country. In some countries, what I want to say here is that when I talk about business line of credit, not for the country, but let's say for your business in a specific country or specific states, the thing is that some businesses are international and you might need to have cash to actually expand overseas. Okay, so long story short, make sure that you your research and compare lenders, and that you actually complete and submit your application. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. In today's conversation, I was just talking to you about how to get an emergency business line of credit with no income. Okay, so I gave you the steps, the overview, the review, the approach, the bonus, and fantastic. Thank you. God bless you. I'll speak to you later on.